3 foreign trade zone operating agreements, one with Schaefer Brothers Distribution Company Incorporated in Carson. One is a subzone single user by IKEA in Lebec, California, and the third one is with Fuji Trans, a general purpose zone, again in Carson. Under all three, the CAO has also submitted a report and recommendation for approval. These are all have 5-year terms at the beginning, and then options to renew for 3 5-year terms, 3 more 5-year terms. So there's a maximum of 20 years.
And I'm assuming they're all participating in the off-peak.
Yeah, the care pass.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So there was some technical corrections. Do you want to give us those?
Yes,
Catherine?
we're going to, first of all, I'm Catherine McDermott, Deputy Executive Director of Port of Los Angeles. We are going to make the correction on the IKEA agreement. There was a discrepancy between the board report, which says it's a 10-year with 3 5-year options, and the agreement itself, which correctly says it's 5 years with options. And we will go back and make that correction internally and confirm that with the CAO's office.
CEO has Alvin Newman, CEO's office. We did confirm it, and we put it in our report with the consent and the advice of the Harbor Department.
Fine. Then I have no problem approving those corrections.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good to see you again, Catherine. And then why don't we take 7?
Ms.
Yes.
Honorable City Clerk, did you also approve items 1 and 3?
Yes, we did 1, 2, and 3 together.
Thank you.
Thank you for making me say that out loud. Well, let's just take
Yes.
7, and unless there's no objection, I don't mind approving item 7 without comment. And then item 6.
Under item 6?
Go ahead.
This is the CAO's report on the general manager of the convention center's request for approval of an amendment to the existing contract with Smart City Networks for telecommunication services at the convention center. This contract term expired on June 30th, and the convention center initially proposed an amendment to extend that term on a month-to-month basis until they could finalize a new contract with the same provider.
Right.
The committee did hold this contract
Right.
amendment last time, but now we're up against the deadline for council to act. If council can approve or disapprove, but if it doesn't act, it will be approved. And so since the convention center has a new contract they'd like to bring forward, we recommend at this point, and the general manager also has sent a letter recommending
That we disapprove.
the council disapprove the initial submittal. which
Right.
was
Great. That's what I'm. So we're going to disapprove this one because they wanted to bring forward one that had a better terms.
for the city.
So they haven't been able to do that, so they need us to disapprove this one.
Yes.
Okay, without objection, we will disapprove item 6. Okay. Now, look at how fast I'm going along. Jenny, are you proud of me? She made me get here at 8:30 because she said we would not be able to get through it all. Okay, now what I thought we would do, we have our wonderful general manager, Gina Marie Lindsay, here from the airport. Hello. So why don't we take 9 and 10 out of order? And since we know you've got a big schedule.
Under item 9 is motion Han Rosendahl, introduced on July 23rd, proposing that Los Angeles World Airports be requested to respond to several questions relating to the ongoing airline service reductions at LAX and Ontario airports. Specifically, these are how the reduced number of airline flights at LAX have impacted LAWA's operations, and the efforts to regionalize the air travel demand, how this decrease in flights impacts our local economy and what we can do to remain competitive, and how the decrease in flights will impact the LAX Capital Improvement Program.
And with that lead in,
Yes.
I'd like to introduce Mark Thorpe, who runs our Air Services Marketing Division at LA World Airports. And I'd like to ask him to give us an idea of what the picture looks like, and then let's talk about addressing the questions that were embedded in the motion.
Sure. Thank you very much. If you look at we'll actually start at slide 3. Just to give you a background, the recent airline schedule changes that we've all read about and heard about at both LAX and LA Ontario airports are the direct result of an unprecedented spike in oil and jet fuel prices. Really, there's been a rise over the last 3 years, but there's been a significant spike since January. During this year, oil is increased at a rate that has never been seen before within the airline industry. And after months of unsuccessfully trying to pass those increased operating costs,
Can everybody hear? Do you want to speak a little bit closer to
oh,
your-
sorry, I'll speak closer to the microphone.
Yeah.
After months of trying to pass along those increased operating costs through the form of higher fares or fees, airlines have realized that they've needed to cut capacity to be able to counter these rising costs, and so they've done that across the system throughout the United States. In addition to these rising oil prices, as shown on slides 4 and 5, the U.S. carriers, vis-a-vis their international competitors in Europe and Asia, have been disproportionately harmed by these rising costs because the dollar is so weak. So whereas their competitors can buy their fuel in stronger currencies, they tend to be paying even more for the same necessary fuel for their operations. The result of that is that you have a lot of the cuts, as I'll talk about in a minute. A lot of the cuts that have come at LAX and Ontario have been from the domestic U.S. airlines. And so there's actually a good story with that as well. But before we jump into that, I wanted to address, as we see on slide 7, the fact that, as you know, set against these recent schedule changes, I think there's a long-term trend that we should point out, and that is that during the last 40 years, regionalization has been working. I only included 1997 to 2007, but if we go back to 1960, LAX accounted for 88% of all air travel to and from Southern California. And by about 1990, it was down to about 70%. So there's been a consistent drop over the last 40 years in terms of the amount of traffic coming in and out of the region that goes through LAX. And the important point to note is that this long-term trend is not likely to change, even with the recent service capacity announcements by the airlines. If we look at slide 8.
So you're saying the declining traffic is the result of regional dispersion of traffic, not diminished demand for air service?
Yes, particularly domestic traffic at LAX. When you look at LAX, we have set record levels of international traffic at LAX since 2001. We have not gotten back to pre-9/11 levels of domestic traffic, but that's because domestic traffic is dispersed throughout the region. Domestic traffic overall has grown when you combine all the airports in Southern California, but it's dispersed.
I'm going to talk about it a slightly different way, but we're saying actually the same thing. This slide on page 7 is the single picture that tells us that the emphasis on regionalization actually has worked, because as you'll see, the total traffic demand, the total demand in Southern California is represented by the bars there. So you'll see that in 2007, there's something above 100, whatever it is, 120 million?
Yeah.
Well, no, it's more like 110 million.
Right.
And in 1997, it was well below 100 million. So in the aggregate, in Southern California, there is significantly more travel.
Right.
But LAX's share of that is 58%
Right.
of that total, whereas in 1997, it was 64%. So more of Southern California's travel pie was being served up by LAX in 1997 than it is today in 2007. Only 58% of Southern California's travel pie is being served up by LAX. So that's a good thing from
Yeah.
the standpoint of regionalism.
Right.
It's a little bit more challenging when you get to supporting a capital program, but we'll talk
Right.
about that in a minute.
Right.
One of the things I know the
So
committee,
all of our yelling and screaming about regionalism is actually,
it's made a difference.
I don't know if the yelling and screaming has, but yeah, but
I
mean,
thought it was polite reminding.
okay. That's interesting.
And yeah, and I think just to reemphasize, the cuts that I'm about to talk about, they're not something that's going to affect that trend. And I think that's the other positive piece of news to consider today. On the next slide, on slide 8,
Can I
they-
just reinforce
Yeah.
that means we're seeing big reductions in Ontario, which Mark's going to talk about in a second.
Right.
But it's not because they're moving those flights to LAX. It's because they're just pulling down their entire system. So it's not that they're moving to LAX instead of Ontario
Right.
or moving to LAX
So the
instead
pie,
of Palmdale.
you think the pie remains cut the same way? If they're
makes sense?
reducing
Am I
their,
saying that the right way?
if they're reducing their flights, they're reducing them everywhere.
Yeah, and what we've seen in the media is a snapshot of this fall's cuts. So you'll see in some of these slides later on, you'll see Burbank and Orange County and Ontario. There's reasons why the cuts aren't all the same across the board, but the reality is every airport in Southern California except for Long Beach will have seat capacity cut from it this fall. So it's not as though the cuts are coming at LAX and Ontario and the other airports are in a reverse trend. In fact, this is a nationwide trend, as I'll be able to show you in several slides.
But the airlines like Southwest in Alaska who hedged their fuel cost, they're not cutting their flights. Is that correct?
Yeah, they are not. In fact, they're looking to, in particular, Southwest is looking to grow, and that's actually that actually leads into this chart on 8. There's the story of LA. We've all heard, we've heard at LAX that there's going to be 11% capacity cut, but there's really several stories sort of underneath that aggregate total. The first point is that most of the cuts have come from the domestic U.S. carriers. And when you can look at slide 9, we'll stay on 8. But when you look at 9, you'll see that in fact of the airlines that have cut seat capacity to LAX, of the top 10 carriers, are all U.S. domestic carriers, other than Southwest. Because the second story there is that Southwest and Virgin America actually are looking to grow and expand at the airport, and in addition to that, the foreign flag carriers at the airport are actually growing.
Is Virgin America, they also got better fuel? They have long-term contracts?
I don't know what their fuel arrangements are. Do you?
It's not that they've hedged. They're in a good position in one aspect, in that they have new planes. So startup airlines tend to have more efficient aircraft. They don't spend as much on maintenance. Their planes are more fuel efficient for several years, and then that advantage goes away as they have to start to repair parts and fix planes like all their competitors. They're at a disadvantage in that they don't have as much cash to weather the storm. They haven't built up the war chest like some of the other carriers have. But for Virgin America, they see a lot of opportunities with their cost structure being smaller than the legacy carriers. And just to define legacy carriers for you, those are carriers that were in existence before deregulation in 1978. So legacy just means United, American, Delta, Northwest. So they have a lower cost structure, and they can offer lower fares. They see now as right now, the current environment is an opportunity to compete with these carriers that might be a little bit more strapped because of fuel prices. So the thing is, there's one negative story in terms of the legacy carriers cutting back service, but there's two positive stories. The low-cost carriers want to grow, and now they have opportunities to grow. Virgin America will actually be moving over to Terminal 6 this fall, where they have room to grow and expand their schedule.
Terminal 3.
Oh, sorry, yeah, from 6
I was
to
gonna
3.
say,
Thank you. Yeah, and then Southwest is looking for additional gates in Terminal 1, where they can grow their traffic at the airport as well. And I think that's an important thing for all of us to keep in mind, that challenges for some mean opportunities for others.
But those two airlines' growth doesn't totally make up
Doesn't
for
offset. No, we're going to have a net loss.
Yeah.
Significantly a net
Right.
loss
Yeah.
for the near term.
Right.
But that's going to be industry-wide, and that's part of the reason for that. I think it's important to point out that we aren't in the same position as some of the other carriers, other airports around the country. We're not a connecting hub for any of the major legacy airlines. And because of that, LAX was an easier airport for all of them to cut service at. They tend in bad times to retrench at their hubs. United, if they have to decide at which airport they'll cut service, they will preserve their service at San Francisco or Chicago. And
American is Dallas, and
yeah, and so LAX is not.
Delta is Atlanta.
Yeah, we're not that retrenchment hub for any one of those airlines. That's why we saw cuts across the board by the legacy carriers, and we saw deeper cuts than we might have than we saw at other airports that were traditional network hubs. But the flip side of that is that we're not dependent on one airline. So when you listen to industry analysts, most believe that there will be contraction in this industry. And if that second shoe drops, we're going to be in a better position. Because if you have one of the large carriers go out of business, and you're one of their hub airports, you could be decimated in terms of the traffic loss, the service loss that you'll see.
And then I know you're going to address, as you said, the questions that were embedded in the motions, because, I mean, obviously we're hearing that this is, you know, a regional problem. It's every airport's experiencing this. I think what I'm concerned about is that, you know, this was our moment. This was our moment for modernization. This was our moment to
Still is.
It still is to really move forward. I mean, we've got an issue today on the agenda about our workers at LAX. I mean, this is a time when we're trying to sort of lift everybody up, facilities, people, and so it's you know, it's a little concerning that not all the airports are kind of at their moments like LAX is, and it's really of concern to me whether or not this will impact our modernization plans, whether this will impact the airlines feeling good, you know, wanting to participate in some of these initiatives that we're trying to do at LAX.
Let me just address that, because it kind of is the 800-pound gorilla in the corner. And there's no doubt this is a challenging juxtaposition of realities. We've got an airport that is seriously behind, and you're right, this is our moment. So what we need to do about that is develop some new pathways financially. We have to get ourselves in a position where we adopt a financial strategy that embraces the reality of these troubled economic times, but also does not back away from what we have to do at that airport. So we are doing 4 things. We are developing the current base of unrealized non-airline revenues. The airport has quite a number of avenues for bringing in money. And
Like?
of course, you know, we're self-supporting.
Right.
Like fees for how the vans access the central terminal area.
Okay.
We're also going to be recommending
8:30?
that
8:35.
we need to stop providing services that don't pay for themselves. And that means we have to provide rate strategies. If the services are worth providing, we have to provide rate strategies that will support those services. We have to no longer fill positions just because they might be in the budget. We are, we've
Staff
told the
positions.
organization, staff positions, absolutely. We have got to bring down our operating costs. If we're going to build a margin to be
Okay.
able to invest in capital, we have to bring down the margin of what we're spending on operating. So the way I look at it is that there's a practical limit of what airlines can pay at any given airport. And competitiveness was one thing that the committee was obviously concerned about in the way you wrote the motion, and I think you should be concerned about it, because other airports have already done their capital investment, and therefore
Right.
you have a spike in costs when you do a big capital
Right.
program, and then it gradually comes down because
Right.
you're lowering the debt service. We're in exactly the opposite
Right.
position as you articulately described.
Right.
So if you assume that there's a practical limit of what the airlines can pay, we've got to be sure we've brought down our operating costs to the very minimum, and so that we build a margin of what we can put in for capital. And lastly, we have to be sure that all of our projects that we move ahead on are not only scoped to the point where they are as a reasonable cost, but also that they do not drive bigger operating costs as we go forward. For example, if we're going to, if we may want to have lots of palm trees, but if the palm trees cost us more money on an operating basis going down the road, we should think twice about that.
Just don't get ficus.
Good advice. Good advice.
So, having said all that,
Are we going to be able to go forward?
Yeah.
Yes.
okay.
We
So
are.
the decreased flight is not going to impact our capital improvement plan.
It's not going to slow us down, at least for the next 5 years or so. And I should share with you that we've had very robust discussions with the airlines about our list of projects. which we will be coming to the committee and the city council shortly with.
Let me ask this question. Have they pretty much decided now? I mean, are they done with deciding where they're cutting their flights, or are those decisions still being made? And is there ever a moment where we're going to know this is it? The flights are set for next year, or they're not set, or are they just?
You've asked a $64,000 question.
Okay.
A lot of that depends on
Actually,
what
it's a $9
happens.
billion
Yeah,
question
exactly.
in LA.
The reality is, we've seen oil drop by about $20, the
Right.
price per barrel in the last 2 or 3 weeks. Nobody really knows how much of this bubble is speculative or whether this is really a permanent shift in demand, and I think a lot of it depends on that. There are probably more cuts to come in the winter, but a lot of that depends on what happens with the price of oil. I would say that these cuts have been made possible by airlines cutting a number of aircraft out of their fleets. Most of the U.S. carriers have returned or sold off significant portions of their fleet, and I think to have additional cuts this significant would take another culling of their fleet. So I think you'll see some in the winter, but probably not as significant as this fall. And if it continues, if the price of oil continues to drop, you may see it actually flatten out and possibly some growth. But if the cost of oil does continue to drop, the low-cost carriers probably will be in a much more expansionary mode.
Are there any other things that we can do to encourage them to keep their flights at LAX in Ontario?
Keep our costs down.
Keep your costs down.
Keep our costs down.
That's the biggest thing.
That's really it, because they're facing the economic reality every month of trying to make payroll, and when they spend more of their money on fuel,
Right.
they've got a challenge.
Of course,
I don't think there's anything else we can do.
Actually, I think one of our items that we're going to hear is about our service workers, and I would think that their argument would be provide better customer service at LAX, and that's what the airline's passengers probably would appreciate as well. So hopefully, again, we don't cut, the one thing that passengers really care about, and that's how they're treated and how they're taken care of on the planes, off the planes, in our airport. I think we can't lose sight of that.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. LaBonge, we've
Well,
been
thank
joined
you.
by Councilmember LaBonge.
Hi, Ms. Hahn. Thank you.
Good morning.
Director Lindsay,
Morning.
staff. Good morning, everybody. I'm sorry I'm a little late, Ms. Hahn.
I know you probably didn't notice that this meeting started.
Well, I thought it was
at
8:45, but I made a mistake, so I apologize. I'm
8:30.
glad I'm not waiting for a plane because I would have missed my plane. All that being said here, I think the key is, as we move forward, whatever period we're going through, and this is a very nice, brief period, we got to look to the long run, too. This summer, they're making changes. But the reality of the world is, and I'm glad you had how we relate to the European market, the British pound, the yen, etc. In our lifetimes, because we're right next to each other there, you're a little ahead of me, but I won't tell anybody.
Tom.
I just want to know if anybody was listening. I would just listen. By 1 month. Okay. I just want to know if they listen. It's an old thing. The slice of the pie that we grew up with, Ms. Hahn,
Yes.
used to be very big in the United States. We were very big and powerful. But now Brazil has a piece of that pie, which is good because people in that part of the region of the world are having something. I talked to a guy the other day, and I was talking to him about Brent Favre because my son wanted NFL Network on our satellite dish, and he acted like he knew Brett Favre, but he was in India. He didn't know Brett Favre from anybody, but he was in India taking my order to change the Silver Lake dish to receive NFL Network 154 on the channel. India has grown, okay? Russia has grown. The European Union has ignited. The dollar that we knew and what probably built the American push of this post-war period now has slid. So as a public works project, which this is, by a municipality, has to look at it with almost blinders on as a racehorse to try to make it a facility that people want to come to. People want to come to if it's easier. All of us want to get off easier in our movements here. So that's your challenge, and I just want you to meet the challenge, which I know you will, and the team that you put together and support that effort there. But there's a reality that we got to say as people. And I'm not even saying, too, this is a deeper political question. of the effects of 9/11 is you have a choice in the world to go other places. We tend to go to the same places. But Europeans now may find it difficult to come here because, and South Americans and people from around the world, because they have to go to their consulate, they have to pay $500 for a visa, they have to then wait for the application, and they may not get it, and they may say, you know what, I'm going to go to Mexico. Now, mind you, if they go to Mexico and they're from Australia, they could fly Qantas and get in Aeromexico and not even come into the United States, right? They bypass all that. And that's an important value, too, because that helps the airport provide service for everybody. So it's a complicated thing. All I just wanted to say is I'm here to support the airport department in their efforts to do this here, but I don't think it's just this year or next year. I think there's a, pardon the pun because it happened last week, an earthquake in our whole movements here that are going. So I think our best way to go ahead is with the money we got, make it a facility that's safe and pleasant to be in and to get out of. Because you know what Dorothy says, don't you, Miss Hahn?
We're not in Kansas anymore.
That's true, but what was the last line? The last line.
No place like
There's no place like
There's
home.
no place like home. And that's what, when we get to Los Angeles International Airport, we want to say we want to get home and be home. Thank you, Miss Hahn. Thank you, Miss Lindsay. Thank you.
Thank you. You have the handout. We can spend more time describing what is happening, or we can go.
Go ahead, because
wherever you'd like.
you can describe a little bit more if you want, because actually, I think Councilman Rosendahl is in the building.
Do we need to vote on anything right now?
And I think he has some questions on this item. So if there's anything else, you can. He's in the elevator. Oh, there he is. Please welcome Councilmember Bill Rosendahl.
Good. Fix the collar. All right, got it. All right, good job. I love him. Hey, no, also, Ms. Hahn, when I asked when we go to full council on this, this is a real interesting thing to try to put up there.
Yeah.
Oh,
And also
thank you.
to also talk about not just Los Angeles Airport and the United States, but also some of the other gateway airports who are coming to us now, what they've done, briefly, so that we have a picture, because sometimes we're narrow focused. So give us that wide international picture.
Sure.
Sorry, back to you, Ms.
Okay. I apologize. I was supposed to state for the record my name, Gina Marie Lindsay, Executive Director of Los Angeles World Airports. Nice to see you this morning.
So we basically have been talking about the item that you and I introduced, asking for a discussion on what the reduction in flights is going to mean at LAX, particularly as it relates to our capital improvement program. So,
And the short version is that it means belt tightening for LAX and for Ontario, but we're not backing away from the capital improvements that are necessary at the airport.
Did you give all the stats yet about
Nope.
how it's going down?
We were actually
A little
on
bit, yeah.
page 8, and
Yeah.
and I think the salient point on page 8 was it's the domestic carriers, the legacy domestic carriers that are the ones that are really pulling back and retrenching the most intensely. Other domestic carriers like Virgin America and Southwest are actually in a healthier situation, and they may even stretch and grow a little bit. And the international carriers, we're expecting to actually have a little more activity on international. So the picture is mixed depending on which segment of the industry that you're looking at. Yeah. You want to go ahead?
The last 7 weeks, the price of oil has gone down.
Yeah.
But the price of the tickets continues to go up.
Well, and I think we'll see that. Actually, my view of what we're going to see over the next 12 to 18 months is a real sea change in the industry while they pull out capacity so that they get some pricing power to be able to charge what it's really costing them to provide the service now. So I think ticket prices are going to have to go up. And then the question is going to be, to your question earlier, Councilwoman Hahn, how many people will continue to want to travel by air at the newer ticket prices?
Right. Now, when Express Air, which was great, 29 direct flights to 14 of their hubs every day, we saw the doubling of Ontario. We really felt the energy moving. Now, they've cut out all of their flights. Is that right?
Yep, and there's a particular reason for that.
Yeah, the ExpressJet flew actually the worst type of plane you could be flying in the current fuel environment. They flew a 50-seat regional jet. So the engines are like engines on a narrow-body jet. But instead of being able to spread those costs over 130 to 150 seats, you're spreading them over 50. So most of the carriers around the country that have been operating those aircraft that aircraft type have really fled from the regional jet. What ExpressJet did was cease its branded flying operation and return to flying under contract with Continental in a lot of short markets. The regional jet now, with fuel at $120 to $140 a barrel, only really works in markets that are 0 to 500 miles. Anything beyond 500 to 700 miles, it's uneconomical. And unfortunately, Ontario, which had been a success for them, when we look at the traffic that they generated within those 12 months, they stimulated traffic by about 60% in those markets they entered into, which is an exceptional rate of traffic stimulation for any new service, particularly an airline that had no brand, that was brand new. Yeah. So it was a success for them, but they ran into an environment where that model was not going to work, no matter what they did on a customer service or a marketing side of their operations. So what we saw with that, though, was that there was a good story that Ontario service to a lot of those markets within the western United States works. And we actually spoke with an airline a couple of weeks ago about replacing that service with more fuel-efficient turboprop aircraft, because there's been sort of this return to turboprops in the industry.
Very interesting. What about JetBlue? Why did they were just going to New York, wasn't it? A nonstop daily in New York. What happened with them?
Well, that's a great question. The most difficult flying flying in terms of trying to have it be profitable right now in the industry is that Transcontinental Flying. And for them, it was a red-eye flight. So the airlines call that utilization, where they can fly it in the middle of the night and generate revenue with a plane that would otherwise be sitting at an airport.
Right.
But they weren't making enough on the tickets, because red-eyes they're not the kind of flights where you get the highest revenue customers wanting to fly those flights. They were not generating enough revenue on the tickets to cover the price of fuel. So,
but weren't they the newer? They had newer planes, so didn't they? They weren't exactly.
They're 8 years old now. Oh, it's kind of surprising to all of us, but yeah, they've gotten beyond that. After about 3 or 4 years, the maintenance costs rise very quickly for a new airline.
What
like
about
that.
These hubs? No hubs here. See, that's one of our problems.
Right.
It's a problem, but it's an opportunity. And long term, I think we're better off not being a hub, because we have such a diversified market that we are not wholly dependent on a major carrier.
Yeah.
We were talking about that a little bit earlier. San Francisco is very dependent on United. If United gets cold, San Francisco Airport feels it intensely. So long term, we're better off not being dependent on one or two major carriers. In this particular kind of a situation, we get a disproportionate reduction because they retrench to where they are most protected, sure, which is their hubs.
Tell me, the West Coast, from Seattle to Portland to San Francisco to Orange County to San Diego, have they all seen the same kind of a percentage drop in domestic flights?
Yeah.
Not always a similar percentage, but again, that depends on, Seattle is going to preserve more service because it's Alaska's main base of operations. San Francisco is United's gateway on the West Coast. So Los Angeles has been more significant in this round vis-a-vis Seattle and vis-a-vis San Francisco, but you've seen Oakland had roughly twice the number of passengers that Ontario did, and they had the same percentage cut. There were 5 airlines that pulled out of Oakland completely. So it's a challenge not just on the West Coast but all across the country.
Right. Let me just ask, and then I think we need to move to item 10 just for time purposes. Let me just ask one more question. We're doing a lot of reworking, more space, new contact gates for the big A380s. Any news on their front? Are those flights all still coming as scheduled?
Yes. That's the short answer, and the subscript to that would be that the A380 is a very fuel-efficient aircraft.
Right.
So in a strange way, their demand is actually higher. I don't know if we have anybody coming in earlier than they anticipated.
No one's coming in. None of the airlines are coming in earlier than they've announced so far. There's the Qantas service that starts in October, but
right.
The whole purpose of the exercise by Emirates Airlines yesterday was to begin to market an aircraft that they're likely to use on the West Coast of the United States. They're not going to start with that.
Give us a report every couple of months on this and give us updates.
You bet.
Exactly where we're at. Just a quick question. Chernoff's coming next week. When the mayor and I were in Washington, we talked about backfilling the 22 spots for customer agents and then an additional 25. Are we holding up foreign travel a little bit, or Americans coming back, or are the custom agents okay? Or where are we with the numbers of the backfill and the additional?
They say they're going to be totally filled up with their authorized positions by the end of this summer, and I want to give them kudos, actually, because they've done a very good job this summer with overtime to be sure that they try to stay under the 60-minute limit of what they report. So there's positive progress.
Thank you, and I think that's a good suggestion that we get a report back, particularly again as how it relates to our capital improvement program. I think we
Quick question on the TSA people out there: how's that paid for? By the federal government? Is there a surcharge on tickets nationally? Excuse me.
No, there's not a surcharge on international tickets. I believe there is a surcharge of $2.50 that is embedded in the ticket price. That goes toward the costs, TSA costs. That never comes through LA World Airports. That just goes directly to the federal government. It does not pay for the total cost, but there is a surcharge for every passenger.
Good. I wanted to ask what they were doing. I mean, it's curious what any of those people were doing before 9/11, but I was afraid to. But it would be interesting to see the impacts of 9/11 again, the tragedy of that period. Okay, thank you.
Do you see any buzz in the industry about bankruptcies or mergers, or what's the latest back story going on among the airline industry?
Well, there's certainly a high flutter of discussion about and speculation about potential bankruptcies. It is absolutely that, speculation. Mergers, obviously there is one big one that is right in front of us, and that's the Delta Northwest thing, which I think will engender some changes at LAX.
Is that done, or is
No,
it still?
it's not. A government approval of that. DOT is looking at it, and I think they expect a government approval in the fall.
And will that have a positive impact on their flights? Because I noticed that Delta is canceling in the fall their Denver to LA direct flight, which was very disappointing to me.
Positive impact being, will it grow flights? No. I think the merger will mean that there are fewer flights out of LAX with the merged entity than with the separate entity.
Really?
Yeah. Do you see that differently?
So would you consider this Denver to LA
I don't know what's going on in the Denver
flight
to LA.
being one of
I think-
the fallouts of the merger?
Well, I think what you see, it's not necessarily a fallout of the merger at all.
Not yet.
This is the
Okay.
culling that
So
you
this
saw.
is still part of the.
Yeah, well, Denver, LA, for Delta is a route that.
What's my favorite flight?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, it's
My
United.
grandkids live in Denver.
I got truth in
Well,
advertising.
that was one where Delta was challenging United at a flight into its hub. So when you look across the country, when one airline's challenging another in a flight connecting to its hub, most carriers have culled that service because it wasn't for them. That was a route. LAX to Denver was probably mainly United frequent flyers. I mean, United had an advantage with frequent flyers in that market. It would be just like them flying to San Francisco. United would have an advantage vis-a-vis Delta. It's like a United flying to Atlanta from LAX.
Okay.
So that was when that was in this first round of culling. A lot of that service around the country went away.
And did the FAA reauthorization go back on hold until
Yes.
the politics of 08 is over?
It's back on hold.
Figured.
I think they did a 3-month extension for the FAA bill.
Okay, well, we're going to get a report back on this. 6 months? 2 months. 2 months? Okay, 2 months. All right, let's go to item 10.
I would just suggest that in 2 months we really will not have much to
Yeah,
tell
that's
you.
what I was thinking.
Yeah, because what we've actually reported to you at this point is what they expect to implement in the fall.
3 months?
Fair. Great.
Okay, item 10.
Under item 10, we have motion Han Labange, introduced on July 29, proposing that Los Angeles World Airports be requested to present its proposed new concessions program for LAX and to provide future progress reports on the development and implementation of this program.
Okay, this is our long-awaited presentation on what we're doing about concessions at LAX.
Excellent. And I'd like to introduce Debbie Bowers, who is
Hi,
our new
Debbie.
Deputy Executive Director for Commercial Development. So she is leading this effort. And we'll just step right through it here. I'm going to go right to page 1 or 2. I'm 1 on their, in their
Where's
copies.
this one?
See, right,
This one,
right,
okay.
yes.
There we go.
All right. Thank you.
It looks
So
like.
lunch. Okay.
It's important that we explain the fundamental difference in how we are viewing and therefore structuring the concessions program at LAX. Page 1 there shows you it's a unique diagram that is intended to describe the different levels of flexibility and control that we have in the various terminals. LAX is basically 9 airports because we've got
Right.
9 different terminals.
Right.
The bubbles that you see there in black are the ones that are really under a long-term airline lease. Therefore, the airline, long-term meaning through 2024. So the space that is airline space is already set. It's already defined. We have very little flexibility of what would be non-airline space. So de facto, the concession spaces in those terminals are already defined.
Really?
Yes. So that restricts the amount of flexibility as far as doing something totally
And
new
they're defined for how till
until
till when?
2024.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's disappointing.
it is. But
Okay.
that's what it is.
All right.
The terminals that we have much more flexibility and control over are the terminals that are there in white,
Right.
which is T1, T3, the Tom Bradley terminal, and then ultimately what we've identified there as the Tibbet bump out, which is the new concession space.
Sounds
that
like
we
a dance
expect
from the
to build.
60s, a Tibbet bumping back.
We're trying to be
70s
cutting
and the
edge.
disco age.
I don't know.
Yeah.
You were good. at-
Okay, I think 60s we were bumping and backing.
So
Oh, my God.
the idea that we intend to convey with this graphic is that the flexibility and possibility for kind of really new and different is going to be concentrated on those terminals where we have the greatest flexibility, which
Okay.
is T1, T3, and Tibbet now and Tibbet ultimately.
And what's T6?
Terminal 6 is an orphan.
I see that. What does that mean?
It's an orphan because there are parts of it that are under long-term airline control, parts of it that we control, but so it's just kind of a hodgepodge.
Okay.
So I
So you're
think
basically just talking about Tibbet, T1, and T3 that,
we'll be redoing all of the concessions, but the ones that are in the concessions that are in the airline-controlled terminals will just be refreshing the spaces that are already dedicated to concessions. Is that a fair way to say it, Debbie?
Yes, that's a fair one.
and who will be refreshing them?
The concessionaires that win the proposals.
Okay, so if they win the proposal, they'll be responsible for tenant improvements.
Yes, and we will get to schedule and how we're phasing this and
Okay.
how we're approaching it. But this was an
Okay.
important backdrop for you to have. The next couple of pages are simply benchmarking.
Okay.
Where we are relative to other industry airports. The message on page 2 is that LAX has severely less concession space than most other airports. That's a problem.
And the space that is defining is the current space?
Yes.
Because many of us feel like there's space that has not been identified as space.
You mean it has not been dedicated to concession
Yes.
space, but could be dedicated
Yes.
to concession space?
Yes.
We are really mining anything that's a possibility on that.
Right. In terminals 1, 3, and 6, we agree, and we've already done some preliminary schematics.
There's a lot of really
Yes.
kind of dead space at LAX.
And we're identifying those, and they will be included as space available for concessions when
Is
we go
that
forward.
part of this graph, though?
No.
No.
Okay.
No, no.
Yeah.
This is current condition.
Yeah. Okay.
And the next couple of pages are current condition as well.
Okay.
I think I would just point out on page
3.
3 the per passenger spending, sales per enplaned passenger, and where LAX is relative to some peer airports.
Right.
That's not a terrible story. $7, almost $8 is okay. But given the demographic of the Los Angeles area, and we should be way up there with San Francisco at over $10. So we've got a ways to go, and I would expect in several years that you would be seeing us closer to up by JFK and San Francisco than where we are today.
Right.
Is that because we don't have enough concessions around?
A lot of it is because we don't have enough
Right.
space. And it's a combination, I think, of not having enough space dedicated to concessions and not having them refreshed to meet what the current passenger
Yeah, I was going to say
demand
we don't have.
really
I don't think we have the right concessions.
We agree.
We agree.
Yeah.
I think for people who want to spend money, particularly for people who have long layovers, there's not the kind of stores that I think people find in other airports.
Right.
I agree.
The next page just identifies, again, in the benchmarking effort, some of the models of concession types that folks go for. There's direct leasing,
Right.
there's working with prime concessionaires,
Right.
there's with developers and
Right, right,
master
right.
concessionaires. I think the quick story on this is that the industry is really moving away from master concessionaires. And there are, for larger airports, you'll see that they use a mix of different types of models for concession programs based on, what the needs of their terminal are. And our approach is that we are looking at this. Part of the reason I wanted to take the time to set the base of what control we have over which terminals is that we're going to tailor our concessions program to the needs and opportunities of each individual terminal. So there will not be a one-size-fits-all. The goals for the program, I think, are fairly much mom and apple pie. We've aggregated, I think you've probably seen them before. We've taken these goals from things that we have heard from the committee, things that we have heard from the board, and we've aggregated them into just different types.
Can't help it. Go ahead.
Passenger experience, obviously, is a huge deal. Concessions have a material impact on what the passenger experience is. Building non-airline revenue, which was part of our earlier discussion, we've got to maximize our sources of revenues in order to be able to afford this capital program. And then creating opportunity for all sorts of businesses. I'm going to let you go on from there on how we're going to do this, Debbie.
Okay, now we're going to the implementation strategy. We've broken this down into 4 major phases. I'm sure there'll be a lot of mini phases within them. And the first phase, which we hope to have before the board in November, are extensions in Tibbet. Due to the construction that's going on in Tibbet, it just wasn't possible right now to go out and get a whole new concessions program. So what we're doing is offering extensions to the current Tibbet concessionaires in exchange for refurbishment of their space. If any of them decline that offer, we do have the ability through a short form RFP process that's in the existing agreements to replace them.
Okay, for the layperson, you would think this would be the right time when we're going under a huge modernization, revitalization to go out for all new concessions.
If we'd started 2 years ago.
Why?
Because it takes that much time to put the packages on the street, to evaluate the proposals.
With all due
and then
respect,
to,
we did start 2 years ago, but
and then to allow them the time to come in and do their construction.
yeah, it seems to me this would have been the perfect time to do it.
Well, we looked at it, and the fact of the matter is where the concessions exist today, there probably will be no concessions there. Everything is going to the bump out, and then a reconfiguration and probably a lot less concessions on the land side. So we looked at it, and to give them the time to match the construction phasing of the back side of Tibbet, it wasn't enough time for them to do a whole new space reconfiguration and to amortize the cost. There wouldn't have been enough time to get the sales to amortize.
Mr. Chair, I've been summoned back to my office for this other critical meeting that I have to go to, so I'm going to excuse myself. I have only one request, though, that when we talk about what you're talking about, we say Tom Bradley. Because I think when we use acronyms, we don't do credit to the man who led this city and led us to our greatest period during the Olympic Games. And I've told that to other people, too, so don't feel, I know people in government, they talk terms that I don't understand. So just a thought. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, I want to be sure that we are being clear that these are refreshed and new concepts. They are the existing concessionaires.
Right.
If they decline to step up to the benchmark that we set for them for these extensions, then we will go out and get new ones. We'll have to really scramble.
So you're telling them how they need to look as but it's the same exact
If they renew,
entity.
right? It's the same entity.
And you're just telling them to repaint, or?
Well, we are putting in some guidelines and some standards, and we are asking them. You'll have new facades that
Okay.
will match the look of the terminal to match it for the 2010. All
Right.
the refurbishment and the advertising and everything that's going on downstairs in the ticketing lobby.
Right.
So they'll look nicer, but it still will be McDonald's and all the rest of them.
Right.
We may replace some of the stores downstairs in the retail part of it, but we're looking at all that right now.
Yeah, I mean, I just got to tell you, I mean, I think that's a lot of what we've heard, particularly with our international passengers, is that we just do not have what people want. So it's disappointing. We have been talking about this forever, but you know, if this is your plan,
well,
it's just disappointing.
We've
I
got
think.
the carrot at the end here that I want to describe. Debbie described it, but I want to try it again. We're building the the Tom Bradley International Terminal bump out on the west side. When we do the gates on the west side, we're also building a major extension to the west of the FIS area, the Federal Inspection area, and then above that, a huge new concessions area.
Okay.
That the whole business proposition of how the concessions work at the Tom Bradley terminal will change when that opens. So as a practical matter, we really couldn't go out for the kind of long-term
are we doing
contracts for the existing space.
So are we also
until
doing
that's available?
Okay, but are you now going out with the RFP for the bump out?
Not yet.
But see, what makes me nervous is that we'll be back here and you'll say, "Gee, we didn't have enough time." And seems like you should be doing that now.
It's a little premature because we cannot, it's not defined yet because we haven't even finished preliminary design of what the bump out will look like and what type of concessionaires will go into the space configuration.
That's all part of the project definition work that we're doing right now.
But it's in it's phase 4 and I have them on a timeline.
Yeah, we have been talking about this for a long time, so it's a little disappointing. Okay.
Well, in addition to the landside concessionaires, we are going to be extending duty-free. And I think to your issue, we have some new refurbishment in the concourses, and they're called walk-through duty-free stores that are really going to be nice.
Okay, good.
That'll add space. So we are going to extend
good.
there for that improvement and what they're going to do in the other terminals.
Okay.
Now, Phase 2 addresses the terminals 2, 4, 5, 7, and 8. Those are the ones that are controlled by the airlines, the black circles.
Right.
We are going to do direct lease packages for those, and we will have those to the board in December. So that will be the beginning.
So they will be, the law will be leasing directly to?
Yes.
Okay.
Phase 3 consists...
And they're going to be released, you're doing RFPs on those?
Right. We'll be going to the board to ask for authorization to release the RFP packages in December.
Okay.
Okay. Phase 3 consists of terminals 1, 3, and 6. As Jean Marie said, we have an opportunity to enhance the interiors, to add more concession space, to improve passenger traffic flow through the terminals. And we're still investigating the best delivery model. So we'll come back to you on that in early 2009.
And is one of the delivery models a potential developer?
It's a potential.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want to have a whole bunch of contractors doing work all in the same space. And because we have flexibility in those terminals to actually change some of the public space, we need to define everything that needs to be done and then figure out how best to package getting it done.
Okay.
And then Phase 4 is the Tom Bradley bump out leasing that we to coincide with the construction, we will have it to you, the RFP and whatever model we use, by 2011 or earlier. And that way we'll have the concessionaire or concessionaires on board to work with the contractor as they're going through the last phase of the building.
And I know you've got a good team working on this. How are you incorporating the current businesses' feedback or passenger feedback or community feedback, worker feedback? How are you getting all that information as you move forward with deciding what is going to be the best plan?
On the next page, the first thing we're going to do is community outreach.
Okay.
So those will be open to the current stakeholders, to prospective concessionaires, and we're encouraging that 3 to 4 of those in the next 2 months. And one of the main goals of that is, especially for the small businesses in the local Los Angeles type of stores, we want to give them Concessions 101, which will teach them about the procurement process in the city, what's required of them, but also make sure we educate them on the challenges of working in an airport versus a typical retail outlet. And that would include security issues, product delivery issues.
How are you getting passenger feedback? That's clearly, I think, one of your most important pieces. What are people wanting? What are they experiencing? What do they look for?
Sure, we are talking with some folks later this week about doing some very targeted customer feedback on several items. Concessions could be one of those, but we're also employing a couple of consultants that have done this all over the world, and so they have contemporary passenger feedback and market responsiveness to all sorts of different concepts. So we're relying a great deal on that.
And I also would not miss our airport workers, because they're so close to the passengers, and I'm sure they hear earfuls about what's right and what's wrong with LAX. So that seems to be a great focus group, is the airport workers.
Absolutely.
Right.
Well, get their feedback on what passengers are saying about us and what I wish there was a.
Okay.
I think that would be important as we and we always say we want to make sure that it has the flavor of LA as we go forward. That's really important. We want our airport to look different, to feel different, to be very LA. So we hope you're incorporating all that, as well as obviously some of the concessions that everybody expects to find in airports.
It needs to be a mix of national brands and local interest as well.
Right.
Just a couple of quick ones on the Bradley Terminal. The back siding for the A380. Where are we with that, or is that pushed off another year as well? Or
No.
Comfortable?
No, it's
that
not
will
pushed
be
off.
A target on that.
Still, I still have the impression you guys are holding me to January of 2012.
Yeah.
We are.
If there's any
31
flexibility
days
on
in
that
January.
deadline, please be sure and let me know.
You get one extra day in
Environmental
January.
issues. We just passed a plastic styrofoam thing, which we want the whole airport to get real green in everything it's doing. So when we're dealing with the concession people, we're talking about the recycling, we're talking about that kind of processing as well, and everything going more green than ever before.
Yes, and those will be in the bid packages, and they'll have to agree to some of those things that we can enforce as we get the proposals back from them.
Okay.
And Deanery, you mentioned that there's actually 9 airports because we have different terminals. So some of the conversations about an overall one entity that did all kinds of things, that doesn't make sense at this point.
We don't think it's optimal.
Yeah.
No.
So when the concessionaire types are thinking this through, they're going to have to think terminal specific now.
Yes, you bet.
That's a direction that you're giving other
Absolutely.
than the other one. Where are you on that other guy with this quick card to process?
Oh, registered traveler.
Yeah, what's the deal with that lately?
We will be putting out an RFP.
We're trying to expedite an RFP through the process right now. I would expect that we would have something out within the next 3 to 6 months, depending how long it takes us to get through the process, and to write an RFP from scratch, basically.
And as Ms. Hahn was saying about, golly, same groups in the Tom Bradley Terminal, and that's another 5-year period we're looking at, right? And during that 5-year period, are they going to be motivated to do innovative things that make it more attractive as we modernize that particular terminal?
They'll be required.
Right. With those extensions that we're offering them as early as November, they will have to do some refurbishment, and they'll have to do it under our design criteria and standards.
And last question I have on all this, are we being very sensitive to the workers, living wage, health care, and all the benefits that matter so much to us?
Absolutely. I am not the expert on how the city contracts work, but my understanding is that if you do a contract with us, the living wage applies, and all those requirements apply as well.
Yes, they're all in the RFP, and they'll be in the contract.
In any way, does this whole airline business of the economy impact all this? Or is this a different timetable, different sensing, and you don't have to worry about it?
What the experts have told us is that the concession industry realizes that there are ups and downs in the airline industry, so we do not think it'll affect potential proposers, and we still think we'll get the interest that we would have otherwise.
And the other green-lighted projects, like the consolidated rental and the people mover and the green line and all those things, do you still feel them within your energy of timing now?
We're actually meeting on the consolidated rental car feasibility study, which is the first step on that, later this week. I think that the timing on that will probably be slowed down a little bit, and I think the automated people mover is going to be very highly tied to the consolidated rental car facility because it will provide a lot of concentrated traffic to feed the people mover. So I think when those other green-lighted projects are actually scheduled is going to be triggered on certain milestone events.
Last thing is the Green Line business. As you know,
Yeah.
this dysfunctional governments in this state get their act together and we get a 0.5 cent sales tax on the ballot. There is money set aside in that process for the Green Line, which then would complement LAWA's commitment to it and hopefully airport access and the FAA. So we're still on target with visualizing the Green Line into the airport.
Yes, the specific plan amendment study still has a proposed Green Line station on the, I think it's the southwest corner of Manchester Square.
Yeah, I love that because, you know, these politicians who don't like the Green Line, the public likes the Green Line. They obviously believe it's a no-brainer to put something into that airport like everybody else on the planet does. So it polled pretty good in all their politics of it. So let's hope the 0.5 cent does get on the ballot and the people vote for it and we can get
Right.
ourselves.
And I want that green line connected to a harbor line, which goes down to San Pedro and connects to the cruise ship terminal, which I will bring something up that I'm looking at Catherine McDermott. Catherine and I and Geraldine went last week to Florida to meet with Disney, the president of Disney Cruise Ships, to see if they would locate their Disney cruise ship permanently in Los Angeles. For their West Coast trips. One of the things, and we'll get together and talk about this later, but one of the key things that they would like to see us do a better job of is for the passengers at LAX a smooth transition to their Disney shuttle to the cruise ships, and then when they return, an ability to check in from the ship in San Pedro, get their boarding pass, get their luggage custom screened, and taken right to the airport. So that's something they're looking at that they do in Florida for their passengers. And I think we're doing it at the convention center. People can check in and get their boarding passes and check their luggage. And I think customs would appreciate, no more touching of your luggage after it's been screened, whether it's the cruise terminal or wherever. So that's something I really would like for you and Dr. Nats to work on as an added value when people take cruise ships out of San Pedro.
We're happy to work on that. Anything that can get the luggage from somewhere else, bypassing the front of our terminals would be a good thing.
And we want to thank you for the 340-acre north there. We're working on the planning and what goes there, and the community's been involved. Your folks have been terrific, Robert Johnson et al. and Mike Collins and so on, and we're very happy with the energy. But get me those 3 holes for that golf course by the end of the year, like we've been saying over and over, right, Tom Flintoff? He wants to play golf.
We are working on it. We have run into some interesting environmental challenges.
Thank you. So why don't we hold this in committee and get a progress report maybe in 60 days on the concession. This is something obviously of interest to so many people. We just all feel like it's a key part when we talk about making it a world-class airport.
It is, totally.
It's a key.
The greening thing, my Alex Fay, I want him to be all over your people's stuff on that because we're really into that greening thing.
Great. We're happy to have his involvement. We think we're doing pretty well, but we always, as new ideas come forward, we're absolutely open to them.
Thank you very much. And I know you have a very busy schedule, but the next item we're going to take up is the workers at your airport. You have an opportunity to even sit in the back and listen to some of the testimony.
You need to hear from me on progress.
I would love.
Yeah, we'd love to hear your
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
I'm just quickly, I'll let you know that as promised last time we were here on that, we've made progress, got an RFP out to get a consultant to help us put together the service standards that de facto will end up allowing us to not only raise the standards of performance and security and employee work environment and everything else, but also then allow us to have less traffic on the air side of the airport. So we think we're very close and hope to be able to take the selection of that and the final contract to the board at the next meeting.
Excellent.
Okay, good. Thank you. We've got several members of the public that are here to speak on item 8, so I thought we would take 8 next.
Item 8 is motion by Han Huizar, introduced on July 25th, proposing that the city attorney be requested to report to council with recommendations on how to implement a program to reduce turnover and ensure training for airline contracted service workers. And this would be in order to improve service quality, safety, and security at LAX. The motion further asks the city attorney to consider options for setting higher wage and benefit standards, as well as training requirements similar to those used at San Francisco International Airport. Also pending on the same file are the earlier motion, which asks LAWA to report to committee on options to improve the working conditions and wages and benefits of the passenger services workers, as just discussed by the executive director. And LAWA's report is still pending on that file.
Well, I think it's appropriate that we have this item at the same time we're talking about what we're doing to modernize the airport, a discussion about flights coming in and out of LAX, because I think there's a strong feeling, certainly on the city council, that as we move forward investing billions of dollars to make the facility more friendly to the aircraft and to the passengers, we also believe very, very strongly that the experience of passengers at LAX is directly related to the workers at LAX. We know that it's the sky caps, the wheelchair attendants, the baggage handlers, the cabin cleaners, the janitors. Those are the people that I believe passengers interact with the most. You're on the front lines of security issues. You're on the front lines of hospitality. You are the welcoming mat for the millions of people that fly in and out of LAX regularly. So we feel like we ought to be improving your lives as much as we are improving the look of a facility. We don't want to modernize LAX and leave the workers behind. And it's very concerning to me, the turnover rate of many of the workers in those categories that I just mentioned. I believe a stable, reliable workforce is the best way to address what I just talked about, the hospitality issue, the security issue, the experience that passengers have when they come in and out of LAX. So item 8 is the motion that will ask the city attorney to give us recommendations on how to reduce turnover, ensure training for airline contracted service workers in order to improve the quality, safety, and security at LAX. So why don't we have some public comment? I thought we would take them first. I'll call up maybe 4. We only have 3 chairs up there. I'll call 3 at a time. Carlos Alvarez, Robin Wilson, Carolina Briones. Actually, if we got another chair, we could have 4 people come up. Okay. And let's have for Reverend Michael Eagle as well. Why don't you come on up? Okay. You want to set the clock at 2 minutes? Okay.
Okay. So we're going to go like this?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Hi, my name is Robin Wilson. I am a worker for a contractor that services American Airlines. I've been working at LAX for 6 years. My job is a guard, and I control the access of one of the doors that accesses the AOA, which is the area that is where the tarmac is. I'm sorry, I'm nervous.
Oh, that's okay. We all are.
What I do is I authorize people to go in and out of a door that will lead them out onto the tarmac to where they take a shuttle bus that goes from one terminal to the next, and it keeps them inside of security without sending them out and around to go in and out of security screening all day.
Right.
When I first got there and started working at that post, the person that trained me was the person who was there before me that had been working that job. So I didn't get a technical training at our company. Nobody said, this is the do's and don'ts, this is what you do, this is what you don't do. My average take home is $12.50, and my rent was $875, but now with the cost of living and everything going up, it's $1,000. So that leaves me just $250 to do everything else with, which is try and pay my car note, pay my insurance, and we don't have health insurance, so I have to go to USC County Medical Center for my medical insurance. For my medical care. I do have a family history of heart disease, diabetes, high blood pressure, and ovarian cancer. So it's very important for me to stay on top of my health. But our company doesn't provide it, and the airline doesn't pressure our company to provide health care for us. So that's it.
Thank you. I appreciate your testimony.
Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. My name is Carlos Alvarez. I work for AirServe, a contract company for United Airlines. I've been working there for 2 years. I'm a lobby agent at Terminal 7. My job is to control the TSA checkpoints and to enforce security and baggage regulations for United. We make sure that only authorized people are allowed into the sterile area right before the document check, TSA, and then the X-ray. And then basically, if we weren't there, TSA would be cluttered and with people. So what we do is we screen passengers, only let passengers in, only let people who have the regulation size bags on, and therefore if the bags are too big, we send them back to the checkpoint, and then they have to check in that bag, and in turn the airlines make their money that way as well. Unfortunately, we had an emergency shift bid about a month ago, and we've been cut. Our department has been cut short, and so many days, maybe half the week, maybe we'll have one person at a post. And if you've ever been to LAX, you know how busy it gets, and you get tens and hundreds of people coming at you at the same time, and you're trying to direct this person, you're trying to direct that person, you've got this person, you're trying to make sure that he has a boarding pass in order to get them through the sterile area. So. It can be very hectic ever since we've had this emergency shift bid, and I feel we do a good job. We do, as good a job as we can with the amount, of staffing that we have. I feel that we're undertrained. We're not trained enough. We're not trained for evacuations, first aid, things of that nature. And with the council's permission, I'm not sure if everyone is going to get the time to speak. Can I have everyone here from the airport please stand up just to be acknowledged? So everyone who's wearing a purple shirt, please stand up, or anyone who works here, just so that she can acknowledge the support that everyone
Thank you.
here is given.
I appreciate you all coming down here. It makes a good statement. Hi, Jose. Thank you. Got a new haircut. Okay.
Hi, I'm Carolina Briones, and I'm the research director at the LA Alliance for a New Economy. And I don't think you'll be surprised to hear that we strongly support raising training standards as well as wage and benefit standards for these workers at LAX. And I think it is pretty clear what the existing problems are with the lack of training, high turnover, and how that really threatens the successful operation of the airport. And it also puts security and passenger safety at risk. And we've been here before. As you know, we've provided lots of testimony on what these problems are. So I just want to reference it so it can be part of the record today, the previous testimony we provided. And today I just want to focus specifically on this question of raising compensation standards and how this will have benefits, including reducing turnover, how that works. And so the current standard that does apply for this workforce, it is the living wage ordinance, the city's living wage ordinance, and it has been very effective. What it's done is it's prevented severe poverty, right? It's lifted workers above the minimum wage, so we don't have folks in severe poverty. But we have done a study, and we looked at, so how has this ordinance really played out? We did that study in 2005. We teamed up with some economists at the University of California. What we found is that it has lowered turnover from what it was before. But the high turnover continues to be a problem, as you've heard, because the living wage really, it's not providing the income that's necessary for people to meet their basic needs, just exactly as was said a moment ago. And it really also has not been successful in encouraging employers to provide health care. So two of the points that were mentioned, that's what we found in our study that we did a couple years ago. And also, we looked at analysis from the California Budget Project, which is another nonprofit that researches these issues. They found the income that's necessary for a family with 2 wage earners and 2 children in LA County to meet their basic needs is about $32,000 per wage earner per year, and that works out to about $15.30 an hour, assuming they're working full time. And interestingly, that's about the same amount that the city janitors are making that work at the airport, sometimes alongside some of these workers, and that includes full family benefits. So that 2 minutes went really fast.
I know.
Just also wanted to mention the health benefits credit. It is $1.25. It has not been adjusted since the ordinance was passed. Hasn't been adjusted for inflation. That's been over 10 years ago. It's, there's no way it's keeping up with what the costs of healthcare are.
Okay.
And there's lots of research on the connection between raising wages and benefits and lowering turnover. Got lots of evidence on that. And there's also a study on that UC Berkeley did about San Francisco's Quality Standards Program, which was mentioned in the motion, and how that has really helped to improve training, lower turnover, improve security, and also customer service quality at the airport.
Right.
So just wanted to mention those points, and I've got lots of information I'm going to submit.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Reverend.
Thank you. Madam Chair, Michael W. Eagle, pastor of St. Mark AME Church, LA, and to you, Madam Chair, and Councilman Rosendahl and Labange in his absence. In 2007, I made a request for the first Sunday in May to be declared as Mother's Day for mothers who lost loved ones to violence in the streets. You granted that. You carried it into 2008, and I want to thank you for your sensitivity and your interest in that. Also for your interest in the plastic bag issue. I was sitting there thinking, if I could help somebody along the way, then my living would not be in vain.
Right.
And I realized how helpful we are. We help people. We have an interest in helping people. Naturally, some of our interests get more of our attention than others. That's obvious and it's natural. But the significant thing is the willingness and initiative to help people in need and help them where we can. If you're in a political arena and you can exert some political influence and power to help a good cause, that's good stewardship. If I can assist with helping someone in the community, that's good stewardship, because we all have to be accountable for our stewardship and not wasting it. So being a good steward, in this instance, is also looking for fairness. And that's what we're requesting now. Just fairness. Not to pay these workers too much, not to pay them too little, but just being fair. Fair for them to have the adequate dignity that they should have and need, and adequate health care. 32% is the rise in emergency visits across the United States, primarily because of a lack of health care, and most of those are children. So what we're looking for today is just for you to continue your efforts in being fair. That's what we're looking for. Fair for the dignity of these workers.
Thank you. Thank you. That's very eloquent. Thank you. Okay, the next speaker, I only have one more. Lily Beth Navarro? Lily Beth, are you still here?
Councilmember.
Oh, okay.
One thing to leave you. Is
Yes.
that okay?
Can you get
It's
that,
the
Jenny?
petition that we have from 40 AME churches.
Awesome.
And is it time to read it?
I don't think so, but why don't you submit it,
I will
and
submit
we will both read it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning, Mike. And remember, good morning. I'm Lilibeth Navarro. I'm the executive director of CALIFE, Communities Actively Living, Independent and Free. It's a nonprofit independent living center that serves the central Los Angeles area. I applaud the City Council's leadership in creating high standards of safety, security, and service quality in order to protect passengers, especially those with disabilities like myself and the elderly. In fact, since the Air Carriers Act and the Americans with Disabilities Act, a lot of us have been traveling, fighting for our rights, a lot of us. As a disabled passenger, I've had a variety of experiences with airport workers. A lot of them are people of goodwill, hardworking people, and I've had the extremes of experiences. On one hand, I've been pulled and tugged abruptly, bruised. But on the other hand, I've had the gentlest, most careful people helping me transfer. And for those of us who fly with mobility impairments, the transfer is the most essential part of the flying experience. The transfer from the wheelchair to the aisle chair, from the aisle chair to the airplane seat. So these airport workers provide critical services to us, and their working conditions truly affect us.
Mm-hmm.
We in the disabled community strongly support and advocate for them to receive better wages and benefits.
You can go ahead and finish. Go ahead and finish.
Okay. And to encourage them to stay on the job, because their being there is part of the reasonable accommodation that we need. They do back-breaking work and wheelchair handling, baggage handling, in order to feed their families. And in this very bad economy, we need to support them. Airlines need to make air travel accessible to passengers with disabilities by ensuring adequate levels of training and staffing. So we wholeheartedly support your support for them, and we thank you also and ask that put the picture in your mind. We have a traveling population that's elderly also, and it is important to us that they're happy, and they're only happy with good wages and benefits.
That's true. Thank you very much. None of you guys better be bruising or pushing her. Thank you, Lily Beth. We appreciate your testimony. Okay, do we have the city attorney come up on this? Is that what we're doing? Oh, good, my favorite city attorney. Well, this reminds me of when we came to you several years ago about our hotel workers, and we asked, and we'd had sort of the same issues. We'd heard testimony after testimony of, poor wages, no benefits, turnover, no security in their jobs, and we asked the city attorney to come back with recommendations on how we might lift up the working conditions for our hotel workers who benefit from the hotels benefit from LAX. This feels similar. We've heard a lot of testimony from a lot of workers for a while now on a lot of these issues, and it's for me, it's about making sure that the passenger experience at LAX is one that will keep them coming back, and we know a lot of that has to do with the workers. We want them well trained. We want them stable. I don't like this high turnover in these workers. So what this motion asks the city attorney to make some recommendations on how we might ensure that these workers are well paid, they have good benefits, they've got good training, and many of them are dealing with security issues, I think, and not getting the kind of training we would expect people who are handling security issues to not get. So you want to tell us what you're thinking?
For the record, Teresa Stamus, City Attorney's Office, also.
Ray Lagunas with the City Attorney's Office.
And certainly our office remains committed to your goals here, and we look forward to working with policy staff, airport staff, to develop and meet your goals. As you know, we have passed a living wage law that applies to citywide when acting in our proprietary interests. And I was pleased to hear the testimony that that has been effective. Maybe there's ways it can be even more effective. We'll certainly look at that.
It was interesting the comment about the health benefit piece that has not been touched since we implemented this ordinance.
So again, it was helpful to be reminded of that, and we certainly have a lot to look into. What would also assist us is because of course, we have the legal expertise. It would be helpful to also have policy staff and city staff, in addition to airport staff, work with us on this, as we have worked with city staff in the past on previous legislative efforts. So, we always appreciate the assistance of the CLA in this, and contract administration, I think, is very key, given their role in the city and in the living wage.
One of the things that we've heard is that the city of San Francisco has established a wage and benefit standards that are higher at their airport than the broader living wage policy. So we'd love for you to take a look at the San Francisco model and see if that's something that we could implement here in the city of LA for LAX.
We will certainly do that.
You mentioned CLAs, CLO. Lau is the most important one
Right.
for me. Is Lau in the room to talk about their sensing of this?
We'll raise her from the
You're Lau.
Well,
He's
I'm a city
He's
attorney.
city attorney for Lau.
And although some people claim the city attorney sets policy for Lau, we do not. And they're the policy. They set the policy directives. And as you know, as Gina Lindsay explained before, there was a board resolution passed to set forth policies to implement performance standards and quality standards at the airport, and there's going to be an RFP went out. They're now vetting through that RFP to pick a proposer who will then develop some type of standards and provide recommendations for implementation of those standards. So, and we'll be working. We'll be working with
that.
Right. That effort's key.
Okay.
Right.
For the record, how many contractors are we talking about? How many workers are we talking about?
Gosh,
I have to defer to airport staff. I don't know.
Anybody in the airport staff fellas? How many people? We got the purple shirts, but I want to know how many people, how many contractors have we analyzed that situation? Obviously, that's the key underbelly here.
Why don't you come out? He's got a purple shirt on too.
Just want to know the facts.
Brian Rudiger from SEIU, Airport Workers United.
Yeah, great.
What we know in working with the airport is that there are over 200 contractors who receive these non-exclusive licensing agreements that give them and their employees access to all the various parts of the airport. What that means in terms of number of employees is that it's in excess of 5,000 employees among those.
And are we taking the 200 contractors, put them on the wall, know everything about where they're coming from and this and that?
Part of that is the process that the airport is involved in that Ms. Lindsay referred to in terms of having the consultant really do the deep analysis. I think we're encouraged by that process. Always think it could move faster, but I think the connection is that process is going to address the question of the contractors. Yeah. I think that there needs to be a parallel process that's really looking at the question of what are the wage and benefit standards.
Okay. And as a union guy, that's clear. But Lawa, we obviously want to know the 200 contractors, the 5,000 employees, what their job descriptions are, what their hours are, how much is part-time, how much is real-time. We want to get down to the nitty-gritty so that, in fact, we're dealing with the 5,000 workers.
Understood. Yeah, we've
And name for the record.
we have the Mark Adams, Los Angeles World Airports. Right. We have the process in place that Gina Marie and Ray have referred to deal with the contractors and the performance standards and that sort of thing, which will hopefully, which is designed to bring up the customer experience at the airport. Yeah. But then you raised good points about the worker standards.
Right. Because Ms. Hahn and I mean, we're here in the public light here, but we were out there with the picket lines the other day into the terminals there. I even wore one of those Skycaps hats. But our bottom line is there are 5,000 people that, in our opinion, obviously need not only a living wage but health care and need to have full-time employment and have all the education to do the job properly, and the stability that Ms. Hahn has been saying very clearly comes with a living wage. So when you get all that data, you'll bring it before us again so that we'll get a clear picture?
Yes.
Right.
We'll make sure the airport provides that information.
Yeah, great.
And I think it's clear, we know the airline industry is hurting right now. I mean, we know that. I mean, we heard the reports this morning. We know they're cutting flights all over this country. We know fuel costs are killing them. But, you know, also we heard very clear that we are moving forward with our modernization plan at LAX. And we heard Gina Marie Lindsay say they're going to try to cut their costs so that we can continue to improve this airport. For who? For the airline industry. Because we've heard the airline industry loud and clear that, you know, they have made choices not to come here because of our facilities and because of our lack of contact gates for the next generation of aircraft. So we are continuing our commitment to, you know, improve this airport. So I think it is absolutely appropriate at the same time that we talk about improving the lives of the workers at the airport. And I don't think anybody's going to be happy with new buildings, new paint, new carpet, and a new McDonald's if the workers are still not being paid the kind of wages that they deserve, not having the kind of health benefits that they deserve, and not having the training to handle the jobs that they are being given to do. So, you know, everyone should just know that that's how we believe, and we're not going to be excited about cutting ribbons on new facilities if the very people that are really touching the passengers are left behind in this kind of modernization. We want everybody to rise as we improve LAX. So we look forward to the city attorney coming back with creative, doable, legal recommendations on how we can achieve some of these goals. I was hoping 60 days.
Well,
I think
just
a lot
wanted
depends
to,
when they come back with the RFP and they start the process.
Okay.
Right?
Well, what do
They're
you
expecting
think,
on October
Teresa?
Here's what I understand.
Okay.
The airport's engaging a consultant. I don't
Okay.
know what time frame they've given the consultant, but certainly they are looking at different programs and ways, including San Francisco's own
Right.
quality service
Okay.
program. We plan to be involved in that effort and
Okay.
to guide those recommendations. And
So you think when those recommendations will come back, it'll...
But I think what would be helpful is for this motion to reflect that we're to work with airport staff on that.
Okay.
And also involve, again, Con Ed and perhaps a CLA's office so that we're sure that we're meeting all the policies.
Okay, we would like that written into this motion. Indeed. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you all for coming down here today. We hear you, we appreciate you, and we know that your work out there is really the important work at that airport. Thank you.
Ms. Hahn, the action on this is to approve the motion of the council?
Yes, the action is to approve it with the added,
CLA and LAWA.
yeah, the recommendation that they work with the other groups. Okay, I have no idea what item we're on.
LNG trucks and the LNG
Okay.
fueling station.
Harbor issues. 4 and 5.
Yes, under item 4, the Board of Harbor Commissioners submits 3 agreements with
Okay.
3 private companies that provide drayage services at the ports of LA and Long Beach. And they have agreed to
I think
comply
we're
with
okay.
requirements of the Clean Air Action Program liquefied natural gas truck program. And in return for this, they will receive port financial assistance in replacing their pre-1994 diesel-powered trucks for new LNG fuel trucks. 3 companies that have agreed to participate are Cascade Sierra Solutions, Green Fleet Systems, and Pacific 9 Transportation Incorporated. And the CAO also has submitted a report and recommendation for approval.
And we're going to take, I think we're going to take 5 to 4 and 5 together.
Okay, under 5, you have a lease with Clean Energy and the 2 ports for construction and maintenance of a liquefied natural gas fueling station in support of emission reduction goals at the 2 ports. The board initially submitted a board order and ordinance along with the lease. The city attorney subsequently has confirmed that council approval of the lease doesn't require the ordinance.
Okay.
The city attorney's here to confirm that.
Okay, it's 10 o'clock. We're close to time. Just talk to me quickly about the truck part of it. We've done this before, I believe.
Yes.
So talk to me about that, and then talk to me about the fueling station briefly, issues of safety and
Sure. Good morning.
and
Good
where
morning.
it comes from and all that stuff.
My name's Christopher Patton. I'm an Environmental Affairs Officer with
Hi.
the Port, and I have Kevin McGuy here, who's the Program Manager for this LNG truck grant program.
Okay.
Key thing is, yes, indeed, there were originally 10 contracts approved by our Board of Harbor Commissioners. 6 have already been approved by Council.
Right.
These were 3 more. This
Right.
will bring the total to about 110 trucks out of the 117 that we want to get on the road, over
And
$20
these are
million.
basically replacing
Yes,
the
19
diesel.
1994 and older.
So those trucks are no longer.
That's correct.
And they're going to be
And they
fueled
have
by
to be
LNG.
scrapped.
They have to be scrapped. How do we know that?
Kevin can speak to that, but we actually asked for certification from them, VIN numbers.
Bring back the bumper.
Documentation with VIN numbers that indeed the vehicle's off the road, engine block's been drilled, chassis destroyed, all of that.
Very good. That's good. I never really understood where what the requirement was.
We need evidence of that. And actually,
Okay.
one of the reasons that these have taken more time than we wanted was because of this scrappage requirement, because they needed to assemble these older trucks and provide evidence of their destruction.
Very good.
So the good news is, and I need to tell you this, the largest organization receiving these grant funds is called Southern Counties Express. They are getting 50 trucks out of this program. 30 trucks were paid for yesterday. We gave them a check for over $5 million. Those trucks should be out on the road in the next
Excellent.
10 business days.
Excellent, excellent. And then how many more do we have to go before we're done with this piece?
Actually, with the council approval of these 3, we have 1 more contract, 6 more trucks.
And that's it?
That's it.
That's
And then we commence the larger clean truck program,
Right.
fleet transformation,
Right.
and I think you know that the board has a goal of 50% LNG trucks under that program.
Right.
So this is just an early action installment.
And what is the percentage of diesel emissions that we will have reduced by just this piece?
This piece, well, I think the important thing is that LNG has no diesel particulate matter coming
Right.
out of the tailpipe.
Right.
So actually, out of some 16,000 trucks, we're talking about 117. It's really small, to be
Okay.
honest. But it's the first major installment, and the point is to get trucking industry acceptance of LNG trucking technology.
Right.
And once that word spreads, then we'll be
Right.
better able to put more out on the road.
Right, okay, so where will they be fueling up?
Thank you for the good segue. Catherine McDermott with the Port of Los Angeles. Part of the Clean Air Action Plan requirement was to have an LNG fueling facility at proximity to the ports, and so this agreement, there's actually 3 agreements here, a contract, which is really details the 2 ports' obligations to finalize a parcel map on this property, to join the property together. There are actually 2 properties, one owned solely by Long Beach and one jointly owned by the 2 of us. So that will kind of join those 2 interests together. The second one is a right of entry allowing clean energy to come onto the site and do their due diligence and their geotech work. And the last one is the lease itself. And so this is part of our CAP obligations to have this facility. The contract.
Currently, we have no.
There is an LNG fueling facility up in Carson, also operated by Clean Energy.
Okay.
On premises of Southern Counties Express.
Right.
Okay.
So that is open to the public, I believe. And so this will give one in closer proximity to the ports.
With much more capacity.
Right. Now, safety concerns.
I don't think that it will all be done through a permitting process that will make sure that all laws, rules, and regs are followed. I don't think there are any specific safety concerns. This is not kind of a new thing. This is just new to the area.
And where does this come from, this LNG?
The LNG right now, a majority of it comes from Arizona and is trucked in here.
Trucked in.
But there's a new plant in Central California that should come online relatively soon.
First half of 2009.
And that plant will allow a greater percentage of the product to get here.
So it's still going to be trucked in?
It'll be trucked
hopefully by LNG trucks.
Well, it's a reliquefaction plant in the Central Valley, so that could come in through pipelines as natural gas and get liquefied on site.
But the distance to truck the product would be reduced substantially and improve the supply reliability substantially.
And that's been really the issue, is the supply
Right.
reliability.
How many UTRs do we have currently that are LNG?
Very few.
Yeah.
They're piloted. The fact is there was an original pilot test. The results
Right.
were not what we wanted. So we're
What
going back.
results do you look for?
We compare it to a diesel yard tractor and
It
an
has to do with
In terms of
power.
performance?
It's power and performance.
power
Okay.
performance as well as emissions. And so it performed fairly well in terms of its operations, power and performance. But for some reasons, its NOx emissions were higher than a comparable diesel. And there needs to be some recalibration of that engine to
And
get it.
Now, at one point, we only had like 2, and they were at NYK.
Yep.
Are there
YTI, there's still a very few number of them, and we are trying to sponsor another such LNG pilot right now. Of course, as you know, we also have an electric yard tractor program underway. That would even be better. We have hybrid yard tractor demonstrations underway. So we're trying to put a lot of things in the toolbox.
Right, but you still think the fueling station is necessary for
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
the current
Because
trucks and
the current and the future, if
And the
we're
future.
making a commitment to that 50% of the truck fleet will be LNG,
Right.
we need to know that there's both a sufficient amount and a
Right.
way to get it.
So this company, Clean Energy, will operate this fueling station?
Yes.
Yes, and they're the ones who currently operate the fueling facility
Carson.
Carson.
Okay, and when will this be up and running?
They have about 9, we have 9 months to get through our process, or 6 months, Heather, to get through our process of recording the parcel map. When that's done, the lease will be effective, and they'll have about 12 months to get all their permits and another 6 months to construct. So total, that would be just over 2 years.
And operation of LNG trucks, is that something these drivers, are they, is it a positive experience to own and operate and maintain an LNG versus a
I
diesel?
think the honest answer to that is that that's why we're so anxious to get these trucks that
we don't
you're going to
know.
act on today out on the road, because we think they are operationally reliable. We want to get that established with the trucking industry. There are some LNG trucks in operation today in the port as well as with supermarkets. They have operated reliably. Is there a concern about a new technology? Yes. Is there a concern about where I may get the fuel if I take it out of the port area? Yes. But we've got to get going on this, and I think we can proliferate the acceptance as well as the fueling infrastructure as time goes by.
So are these the companies the companies are getting the trucks?
Yes.
And then they're giving them to employees?
Eventually, as the employee transition kicks under our proposed concession.
Have you done any with just an independent trucker?
No.
No. These have all been with companies?
LMCs, right.
Okay.
Yes.
And we're expecting them to be a part of our concession plan?
Yes.
Okay. You guys have any more questions? Oh, okay. Well, thank you. Again, I'm very pleased that we're moving forward so quickly
Thank
on
you.
implementing this piece of our Clean Air Action Plan.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for staying through the whole meeting.
Not a problem.
Okay. Are we done?
Would the committee, you would recommend approval of the board order and the lease, but disapproval of the ordinance which was submitted?
Right.
Because an ordinance is not required.
Right. That's correct.
And approve number 4?
Yes. And, yes. 4 and 5.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Where are we? Are we done? Oh my gosh. Okay, wait, I have a public comment from Chuck Tenon. Send a letter
Morning,
back.
committee members.
Yes.
Oh,
Go ahead.
well, good. Good morning, Janice Hahn.
Good morning, Chuck
I
Tenon.
wanted to let you know that I met with the Vice President of Community Development for Bank of America yesterday for 3 hours with Noel Weiss, Michael Manigault, for the Neighborhood Funds Program. And I asked for $50 million for Herb Wesson in his district, and they told me they would not give Herb Wesson $50 million or a nickel, but they'd give him money to the organizations that he supports. And they wanted me to tell you
Yes, that they would give
that, no, they have 700, it was 750 billion, now it's 1,000,000,004 billion allocated to spend over the next 10 years. They care about the communities of LA, commerce, economic development, and housing. And they have plenty of money to help these communities, but they were telling me the city does not want to help them, to want to give it to them. That includes the LAHD and planning and council members. They want the money, but when you put in an application, you have to justify it. They like me, they like my proposals and ideas, and they're putting a report to Ken Lewis, who's the chairman. And they're going to help me in foundation and sponsorship funding to help communities. And they also, like TOPA, they didn't know about it. But what they wanted me to tell you is they're aware of all the problems and needs and your presence in the Watts community and the gang prevention and need for jobs.
Good.
And they want to help you.
Good.
And they said one thing, they know most of the council members, but they don't know you.
Oh.
And they need to know you, and you need to know them. Very important. So Noel sent them an email to come down maybe next Monday, the senior vice president, and they said they've got a lot of money, they'd give you the money, they'd help you. You just have to ask them in the right way. And if you support the organizations in your community, like he said to me, now that he knows me, they'll help me. And he's very aware of you, but he doesn't know you. And it would be a great thing. And also, he liked the thing about your fishing trip and that. And I was going to ask you if you
maybe we
did
should take
tuck
them on the fishing trip.
Gosh, I wish we could there.
I wish we could too.
I asked Bill Rosendahl if he was going to come and support your trip. He says, no. He says, I'm too busy. But the Channel 35 on the video, it's a very important tool. And also some of my friends in the San Pedro area there, they're very concerned about the closures, and the city needs to come up with a motion for a resolution. Oh, the MLPA that's coming up. And now the figures have increased to 600 million in local economy and 60 million in city tax revenue when they close down all the offshore preserves and areas of fishing. It's going to affect the economy so bad, and they're saying Chief Janice Hahn should introduce a motion like they did for the 48 closures of state parks. And a couple weeks ago, guess what? Governor Arnold reversed it. He's not going to close it. So if there were a resolution...
All right, talk with my legislative policy person, Jenny Chavez, on introducing that motion.
Okay, and also, Noel did email them, and he was there at the meeting, and, you know, they think very highly of you. They don't know you, but they've got tons of money.
They think highly of me if they don't know me.
They've got tons of money, and they say your organizations, if you support it, they'll help you.
Good.
And
So
is
maybe you can hook me up.
I will. And Channel 35, are they going to come out and do that? Did you talk to them?
Yes, we did.
It's very important.
We did talk to
them. It's a tool, because every week they show it. Your kids are going to put Watts on the map. We're trying to help you.
Thank you. I know you are. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Good person. Anyhow, Noah wanted to make sure you
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, well, anybody else wishing to address this committee? Seeing none, this meeting is finally adjourned. Wow.